Steph Curry is if Steph Curry came to him and said, yo, I want out, which we can't imagine Steph Curry doing. And he won't do that, of course not. But the point that I'm making is that could you imagine if Steph Curry was available? Could you imagine that? You know, we talk stuff about LeBron and how he's approaching free agency and what have you. What if Steph Curry was of the mindset that while I'm here, I still want to compete for championships, and we're not necessarily the franchise in position to do that any longer?
Do you think Steve Kerr has coached his last game at Golden State, Wendy?
Maybe. And I think that's a pretty big step. I don't think I've ever really would have said that to this point. I think there's a couple of things to realize. Number one, it's not like the Warriors have a contract offer on the table and it's just waiting for Steve Kerr's signature. Steve Kerr made the decision to not have negotiations and not discuss it at all until after the season. So even if he was like 100% committed to coming back, they would have to come to an agreement. I just want to point out he is the highest paid coach in the NBA, reportedly $17 million a year. And so, you know, right now they're not a championship team. And so I don't know if you pay your coach $17 million a year. So you wouldn't think this would come down to straight economics, but I just think I should point that out, that, you know, the cost of this could be a factor on the Warriors side, and we would see if you got into a negotiation. The second thing is, I think the Warriors crossed a Rubicon of sorts in the middle of the season when they had trade discussions with the Bucks about Giannis Antetokounmpo, and it became relatively clear that Draymond Green would have been in that trade if it happened. Now, I don't ever think that it got fully advanced, but Draymond was aware because in his last game before the trade deadline, Draymond went out and had one of the most remarkable press conferences of a year of interesting press conferences from him, where he talked about the reality that he might get traded. And so if the Warriors were willing to think about trading Draymond Green, they're willing to think about a future that doesn't have Steve Kerr. Now, it is poetic to want to have Steve Kerr, Steph Curry, and Draymond Green perhaps finish their tenure with the Warriors at the same time. That completes an arc. It makes sense. But it may not be, like Steve alluded to there, it may not be the best way to finish out Steph's career. A new voice might be needed. It might benefit the Warriors and Steph to have a little bit of a curveball when it comes to this last time. It also could be wonderful to not. But I think the fact that there's uncertainty is enough to understand that this is a big moment for the Warriors at this juncture of their history.
Steve Kerr is not going anywhere unless Steph Curry retires, which by his play and whatever else he has said or done provides no indication that he's interested in retiring from the game of basketball. If Steph Curry is there, I believe Steve Kerr is going to stay because Steve Kerr doesn't want to leave him because Steph Curry doesn't want a new coach at this point in juncture in his career. I just don't believe it. I could be wrong, but I don't believe it. Having said that, let's take a moment to pay homage to Steve Kerr from the standpoint that he's one of the great coaches we have ever seen in NBA history. And even when he had 3 championships on his resume as head coach of the Golden State Warriors, Wendy, I wasn't convinced that was the right thing to say about him until he won that title in 2022. The adjustments that were made, in that series against the Boston Celtics, I just can't say enough about him and his willingness to roll the dice and take chances and to have faith in the people that he had faith, because it wasn't just about Steph Curry. It was about Draymond. It was about Klay Thompson. It was about various others. And so this is a 4-time champion who's been to an NBA Finals in 6 years. Now, they haven't been back to the playoffs since that championship in 2022. That's 4 years away from the playoffs. And again, you can pay guys a lot less than $17 million a year to miss the playoffs. We understand that. But there's no question that he knows what he's doing. There's no question that he's an exceptional coach. And there's no question that champions who have produced for him emphatically believe in him. Almost to the degree that Michael Jordan believed in Phil Jackson. And so I look at it from that standpoint. And I say, yeah, he's saying what he's saying. But essentially what it really means in my mind is that he will leave when Steph Curry is walking away from the game. That's the impression I've gotten from watching him, listening to him, et cetera, et cetera. He knows that the end is drawing near, that the best days in all likelihood are behind them. But Jimmy Butler did go down with the torn ACL. And you've got to ask yourself, if Jimmy Butler was available and Steph didn't miss 28 games and Porzingis was available, what would they have been? What would they have been able to do? Those are legitimate questions. But in the end, it's just Steph Curry is somebody to love immensely and to have immense amount of faith in. And I think that even though Steph Curry would never want him to do what's not best for him, he's been there for 12 years, etc., and you want him to do what's best for him and his family, if there is a way for Steve Kerr to stay, Steph Curry would be the first in line to say, please stay. And I think that would be more than enough for Steve Kerr to stay on the job and not walk away.
Mm-hmm. So the Warriors missed the playoffs for the second time in the last 3 seasons. I do think it would be a lot to wrap your mind around to have someone from that nucleus, be it Steve Kerr, Steph Curry, Draymond Green, stay, and they have a different head coach. Go ahead, Stephen A.
I want to say this real quick, too, with Wendy right here on the air with me. We can't imagine Steph Curry wearing another uniform. We just can't imagine it,
Correct.
Because obviously Joe Lacob would never. I mean, the only way he would ever move Steph Curry is if Steph Curry came to him and said, yo, I want out, which we can't imagine Steph Curry doing. And he won't do that, of course not. But the point that I'm making is that could you imagine if Steph Curry was available? Could you imagine that? We talk stuff about LeBron and how he's approaching free agency and what have you. What if Steph Curry was of the mindset that while I'm here, I still want to compete for championships and we're not necessarily the franchise in position to do that any longer? Could you imagine with his sniper-like ability, the greatest shooter God ever created, could you imagine if he were available, what the Golden State Warriors could get for Steph Curry's services, even at this point in his career? Could you imagine it? I'm just throwing that out there from the standpoint like that's fascinating to me in terms of what would be his availability. Because you got to remember, with most other people, Shay and Wendy, so much is predicated on your athleticism. So everybody knows that's going to dissipate and there's going to be incredible slippage ultimately as Father Time kicks in. But when you are a shooter, particularly a shooter the likes of which we have never seen before, then guess what? That buys you time as talent is around you. Wait a minute. All I got to do is get this dude a sliver of space.
Warriors Nation News. Dub Nation, let me ask you something that should make every single fan stop and think for a second. When a dynasty gets knocked out, when the season ends in the play-in, when your head coach starts talking about expiration dates, is that the end? Or is that the exact moment a proud franchise reloads, gets mean again, and comes back swinging? Because that is where the Warriors are right now, and this story is way bigger than one loss to Phoenix. Golden State's season ended with a 111-96 loss to the Suns in the final West play-in game, with Steph Curry held to 17 points, and now the offseason has officially opened, with huge questions about Steve Kerr's future and the next phase of the roster around Steph. Now here is where it gets emotional, Dub Nation, because Steve Kerr did not come out sounding like a man with a simple, easy answer. Reuters and NBA.com both reported that Kerr said these jobs have an expiration date, that he still loves coaching, but that maybe every run eventually needs new blood and new ideas. At the same time, he also said he needs a week or two, a little distance, and then conversations with the organization before anything is decided. Yeah, that is not a clean goodbye, but it is also not a confident "I'm definitely back." That is uncertainty, real uncertainty. And when you have that around one of the greatest coaches of this era, you know the Warriors are standing at a serious crossroads. But here is why I am still favorable to the Warriors all the way. This franchise is not walking into the summer blind. Warriors.com reported during exit interviews that players made their support for Kerr very clear, and at the same time there is already continuity in the front office because Mike Dunleavy Jr. received a multi-year extension, according to multiple Bay Area reports. That matters a lot because whatever anyone wants to say about the season, Golden State is not operating like a franchise in total collapse. They have Steph, they have Draymond, they have decision makers in place. They have ownership that still thinks big. And if you still have Steph Curry, you are never as far from relevance as people want to pretend. And let's talk about Steph, because the whole emotional center of this thing still starts with number 30. He came back from that long knee absence because, as Kerr put it, this is what he does. He competes. Reuters had reported before the Clippers game that Curry was still on a minutes restriction after missing 27 games. And then, 5 days ago, Warriors.com documented that he still erupted for 35 points in 36 minutes to help eliminate the Clippers in the play-in. That matters now, because it tells you what the Warriors are really evaluating this summer. Not whether Steph still has greatness. That answer is already yes. The question is how fast the organization can rebuild enough around him to turn his final years into one more real run. And that is where this offseason gets fascinating, because the supporting cast actually gave glimpses of something. In that Clippers win, Reuters reported Al Horford scored all 14 of his points in the final 5:37, while Guy Santos and Kristaps Porzingis each added 20. The Chronicle described it as Curry and Draymond turning back the clock, but with new pieces finally landing meaningful blows too. So no, the Warriors are not where they want to be. No, they are not a finished product, but they are also not some empty shell with nothing left. They have enough evidence to believe that the right adjustments, the right health, and the right summer decisions can change the whole feel of this team. That is why I do not buy the funeral talk. Now, would it be easier if all of this were simple? Of course. It would be easier if Kerr had already said he was staying. It would be easier if the roster had a cleaner identity. It would be easier if the Warriors had gone deeper in the playoffs instead of missing them for the second time in 2 seasons, as the Chronicle noted. But the reason I still lean positive is because Golden State has something most franchises would kill for: a clear centerpiece. Steph Curry is still the gravitational center of the entire plan. There is a reason, as Windhurst pointed out on TV, and as league coverage keeps reinforcing, that the rumor is always who can the Warriors bring to Steph, not where is Steph going. Because everybody in basketball understands the same thing. If you can still build a contender around him, you do it. And let me say this too, because Warriors fans need to hear it out loud. An offseason full of questions does not automatically mean decline. Sometimes it means honesty. Sometimes it means the organization finally looks in the mirror and admits the next move has to be bold. The same Warriors who considered giant swings during the season, including conversations around major stars, are not going to stop thinking aggressively now. That doesn't mean every rumor is real, and it doesn't mean every fantasy trade is happening. Nah. But it does mean Golden State understands the clock. Steph is 38. The margin is thinner. The next move has to matter. And that urgency, weirdly enough, is why I still like their chances to matter sooner than people think. So here is my final take, Dub Nation, loud and clear, favorable to the Warriors all the way. Not because this season ended the way anyone wanted. Not because the Kerr question is small. Not because the roster is complete. Favorable because the most important piece is still there, still great, still magnetic, still capable of terrifying the sport when the lights get bright. Favorable because the Warriors are not starting from zero, they're starting from urgency. Favorable because front office continuity is in place, player support for Kerr is real, and the Warriors still have enough talent and enough gravity to make this summer count. Dynasties don't always end with fireworks. Sometimes they pause, breathe, look around, and decide whether there is one more punch left. And with Steph Curry in the building, I will always believe there is one more punch left. Now tell me, Dub Nation, should the Warriors run it back with Steve Kerr and reload around Steph, or is it finally time for a new voice and a new direction around the same superstar core? Drop your opinion in the comments, hit like, and subscribe to Warriors Nation News.